Hello, humanity. There are only three branches of government. They are juxtaposed with intelligence, foreign and domestic, shared. In a whole bunch of ways, they are directed to hide here and there because they have only been known to have been collusion slash S only permitted, as we know, was forced within as the value of colonization. That was entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies, also as states. They were only permitted collusion slash S with slavery, for example, and they made countries and companies and not just people reliant upon it. All natures of industry, all natures of ground appreciation, where and how we can only appreciate things as syntax. In other words, the way nature communicates, but we have this replaced, or we wouldn't have had black people's whites of eyes replaced. So what they have been doing is preventing free speech. They're mass identity theft, fraud, slanders. And where they try to justify why and how they do that, they're using even the truths they're using for lies, and that's collusion slash S. One of the ways they're getting away with it is because they've been fishing and have been spying on us through our own law at countries A through Z, specifically to make lie progressions needed at countries A through Z. Right where and how a breaching method keeps other things, others, ourselves, forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to be blamed for things that it caused. The scientific value of the breaching method that James Madison had declassified about. It was replaced right from the communications of James Madison and of nature itself, and of those plural founders that directed us to understand that why and how they could not let us know their names. They directed us to understand why and how they had to force everyone at the same time to get behind the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution the Constitution. They also directed us to understand through declassify. In other words, we're supposed to appreciate how the Constitution has only been known abridged. Voicings pretending other, styles pretending other. Use slash S of every difference to pretend other. We have names of the people of the sciences, they know different words that we don't know only because, the way they have the education. Collusion slash S with use of location slash S that nobody wanted. And nobody wants it increasingly. But how you guys are styles of logic, natures of logic, Boolean logic, and exceptions simultaneously. You guys are shown that you can't afford to have discerned. Where and how you valued fake exceptions planting. Relative to where and how when you were little kids you had means to discern. You don't leave out how we have black people's whites of eyes. And the revelations that come from this. Where and how it is not only left out and replaced, it is replaced. You have fake defenses of our founders, fake integrity of it, that they themselves can't discern because of the extent of the delusions at the same time with the criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, quality aspects in nature of the interbranch intelligence sources at and next to the networks. Next to Fox Connecticut News and Hartford, Connecticut, they are recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming. They have collusion slash S with names next to them through time and at their location that are also involved with the intelligence all along Route 3 in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and conjunctions to it and to that. Like the people with the corner of Elm Street in Rocky Hill and Wethersfield, recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed. They are and have been involved with intelligence families that used to live near me, that I recorded then involved with various natures of organized crimes, and people from other areas that have been planting evidences on my street. And they did this intercities too, and intra. And they have roles with untimely deaths on and off campus. Even if they made up any of this, there were time use slash S of that collusion slash S as people involved with the World Trade Center attack. They don't even have to understand how and why. No, in other words, these are also people that went to other schools who have been building upon predicate acts with facts, fake things in databases at each of the campuses I went with people that are putting fake ties, fake natures of ties between people. And then they're doing little tricks where people are going to speak about things but dishonestly, including about what they think about others. And they're going to use all truths for lies. They are showing needs even to use their kids for motivations where they have to fake their motivations, right? Where the breaching method needs that. The scientific value of a breaching method is replaced right from the communications of James Madison, of our plural founders, to us, and right from the communications of nature itself to us. We have black people's whites of eyes that are the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time, where nature is showing us about difference, where nature is showing us revelations. There are two eyes generated across species bodies, two sexes. See, but and now nature uses exceptions, exception nature, tactical ulterior. You guys are faking exceptions. Then you want to debate it. Your as styles of logic, nature's a logic that force your own motivations to be in evidence, like we in other words, or other people's dishonestly. Emotions are about the simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous. If the formal identities of the law, the private ones, or anyone else could speak about no way difference properly, a lot of things would have been stopped. In other words, I begged Judge Napolitano, I don't even know if he sees it, because there are only three branches of government. They've been fabricating transcripts there through lifetimes. Many people involved with New Britain Superior Court, with all the courts though, but that one in particular, before the World Trade Center attack, they affected confessions to me by an Eric Burgess, which I didn't even tell him the extent of, because there's also a whole bunch of people tied to my grammar school who also took collusion /S with names next to every other campus I went. And I don't know about Middlesex, what's next to it. Conjunctive to it. And their roles, in other words, including with federal evidences, crimes, and whiting forensics, sequence ships. A number of people from Middlesex Community College have state police families interstates, and people involved with the Board of Education and the Wethersfield town offices, involved with Afghan leaders and kids with the Afghan war, and cover-ups of collusions with the World Trade Center attack. A number of people with the class of 1993 will recorded, confess, demonstrate, confirmed, evolved to fake, pretend passions and emotions with their roles with the intelligence community and with the military, foreign and domestic. Mark Violet and others have Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut, and a Joshua Schumacher and a Joshua Stryker and Justin Kovinskis and Eric Jensen and Mike Pandolf have collusions with all sides of criminal, with names on all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the courts and interbranch, and their campuses at the same time, collusion /S with the crime scenes and names next to it, including with the news increasingly. Channel 3 News is recording, confessing, demonstrating, confirming. They have collusions with people that were involved with the World Trade Center attack, foreign and domestic, including victims of it and ties to them, where everyone was locked into, and everyone is locked into. Quality of fact treatment nature that's criminally foreign influence, criminal and seditious natures of styles of logic, of positive treatments and negative treatments. We have in other words, Straits of Hormuz, we are a value progression. And these are people in the news speaking about logistics and religion. Increasingly, people all along Route 3 in conjunctions to it and to that, like a Larry Martin. Recorded capacity development. These are people I never had conversations. It makes it look like we had conversations. My campus said that things, in other words, they were from off the campuses. That when I was a kid and then as an adult, when I caught them forcing a principal child abuser, there are more with the intelligence next to the state capitol. A bunch of people involved with a John Maiano, planting evidences with names with collusions with intelligence families that used to live near me, that I never even saw around him. Two, as people next to Hartford Hospital involved with fake transcripts there, as people collusion slash S with the World Trade Center attack. While they have delusions, intersciences, interagencies have delusions recorded with psychiatry, and they're the readings of American history. Again, they have replaced what James Madison declassified, had declassified, and pretending other by using the words of what people said at the time, leaving out and pretending not to realize the significance of how there were laws against all human differences, all differences. In other words, including against all black people's white survivors. Northern colonies and southern colonies were forced to be roles, even right through the whole Civil War, until they were sure it was going to end, because everyone was measured to maintain an extent of collusion slash just against themselves and everyone else, with those affronts against all women laws. And the difference of the guilt with them or the overt criminal enterprise, private ones, international companies, the parts with it. In other words, witch trial courts. In other words, I can't stand when they bring up witch trials courts. Like there's a witch trials place in Wethersfield, Connecticut, next to Webb House, right where George Washington had to come right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. We are only allowed to hear that with music playing and the narrative changed as collusion slash S with the breaching method, telling it exactly the way breaching method wanted and needed it to be told once we would come out of those things to the extent we could. It knew that everyone was going to come out of those laws that no one wanted collusion slash S with, and sense and sensibilities by that, syntax by that, syntax nature, syntax styles. This is all relative to relative predicate acts. The CBS faked conversations with me in Rocky Hill, Connecticut. They have a bunch of people involved with Paul Kelly, with Air Force, and with other pilots. And I never saw him on my street in my life. I don't know him. They try to make a fake exception, make it look other real quick. In other words, planting evidences. With a Mark Violet, too, people involved with a girl who reportedly dragged to her death, even if that was made up. The networks had collusions with where she was dragged to death from and where she was dropped off, like a mile away, at the corner of Jordan Lane and Ridge Road, reportedly. And 3 spots at the end of the Poland Turnpike. Mark Violet is increasingly involved with a Joshua Schumack and his mother. I never saw him on a campus in my life. He's increasingly involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, with interbranch families, also involved with that, with the World Trade Center attack through past things, where they're using that too, relative to where and how CBS faked conversations with me, with themselves, and with others. They faked ties to me with themselves, faked ties to me with others when I was a kid, when I was an adult. They also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed collusion slash S, forcing groupthink, where and how they force people to speak about groups, and the questions and answers are they're not honestly asking them. In other words, because they're sensing everyone's going to explain everything only if they leave out the roles of what branch or what or who is involved, or the overt criminal enterprise private one side. They have to keep all that nature's demonstrations of their collusion slash S, forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to be blamed on other things, others ourselves. A bunch of people with the military tied to a Mark Violet and a Mike Violet. I never had a word of conversation with Mike Violet. They came to my street to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm things. And increasingly with people involved with untimely deaths in all sides of religious spots, where there are differences of religion. Increasingly a former Mayor Gold and his daughter involved with federal evidences crimes and predicate acts that involve the use slash S of databases. And people putting others, in other words, they do tricks to make it look like people knew each other, lying before, and why they have people interacting at each age. Then they have everyone collusions having to hide that further and further. All along Ridge Road on Mark Violet, recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirm people involved with the former police chief Cintron. Too. Intercities. Intra-cities, a bunch of people at the corner of Elm Street in Rocky Hill, in Wethersfield and in Rocky Hill. They've been planting criminally foreign influence, fake intelligence, and truths used for lies. Truths used as collusions to sense people can't discern that other countries involved overt criminal enterprises, private ones, involved also with the Board of Education. The Board of Education has a bunch of people involved with a Brian Bonin. I only know sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm his neighbors too. People with the name Finelli or Fienza. Finelli is also involved further with people on Valley Crest, involved with sexual and medical offenders of kids, in overt criminal enterprises, and relative confessions. As people who also faked ties to me when I was in grammar school and high school, that I even saw around the schools. They tried to make quick fake exception too with the Joe DeMoro in fifth grade. Is increasingly collusion slash S with Clinton people and with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. And people right through administrations used remotely criminally foreign influence tactically delusions raw. He also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed up with others that they influenced their roles with conversations with people named King are involved also and their neighbors, the neighbors of a king, are involved with various natures of federal criminally foreign influence uses of databases at campuses. I never had a word of conversation with Dan King in my life. Never saw him around a campus in my life. These are increasingly people involved too with the security at the campuses. Are involved with untimely deaths, all kinds of drugs and medicines, crimes that pretending to be against such. They're putting fake use of drugs, alcohol. In other words, they're trying to make fake, except they'll try to take a picture with you and then they'll pretend you actually drank. How are you? So in other words, where our countries are forced to be unity because we value as unity and appreciated that way with syntax. That is forced by how we are a species body, and there are other individual species bodies, and each species body is made up of a whole bunch of individual bodies, and all group differences. Like we're to an extent we are shown nature's body generating them: two eyes, two sexes, three parts of time bound. See, but we are prevented short words. The news that is stealing us to fake transcripts cannot afford to have discerned what is said, the value of what is said, let alone what is communicated. Because they say things after they said others. For example, nature shows us to value how communications is simultaneously greater than and more finite than what is said. So there are a number of different murders through the years and names next to body dumping spots. A Mark Viola also has collusion slash S with people next to the body dumping spot, reported body dumping spots. Of a serial killer from Wethersfield. And there's a blue van like that was also brought up in the confessions of people involved with the Scalora family, also with foreign and domestic Navy, Air Force, and people involved with identity theft. I never saw him on a campus in my life. I don't know. They tried to make a fake exception. He would drive by and he jumped in a car. Like pretend he's walking, someone's picking him up. Make a fake tie to me. These are people in the intelligence community that are unmarked police forms that stay that way. Stay collusion slash S with predicate acts with facts with databases. We tactically juxtapose distinct natures and methods of organized crimes that no one wanted collusion slash S with. But in other words, the breaching method exploited you with exceptions too. Otherwise, you wouldn't have left out how we have black people's whites of eyes. Wouldn't value roles with anyone who tries to use logic and reason the way nature shows us to communicate about why and how. If you change what nature is communicating, in other words, when nature is not only itself as criminal insidiousness, it shows us revelations generated from where and how we have the same color eyes, different color eyes at the same time. Two eyes are generated across species bodies. Exceptions in exception nature. Some people have no eyes. they come with demonstration /s of the same. For example, there is the identity of nature has three parts of time that are bound by and as its nature, its identity, which is making more of itself through temporary /lasting space nature. The ancients demonstrably revealed that this is most probable and most practical to theorize, let alone to convict, regarding where matter was generated from, how it is generated. It has to do with that body we could discern to an extent, generating through things between while as each species, distinctly but also non-distinctly. And note how humanity is the only species that has been used remotely, replacing what black people's whites of eyes communicates exactly the way the breaching method only permitted to. And then the people want to speak about crimes or time relative to it. How come no one brought up? But prisons are involved with criminally born, all kinds of predicates. They have rules with the crime scenes that is recorded. They are shown. They are used remotely. Shown. They need to hide for themselves, their family members, and regarding their syntax, and regarding the organized crimes of the databases against every single person at each campus. Everyone wants this countered. And then when they investigate what people say about others, they can't do that on paper because they would have shown. In other words, they tricked me to be where people could even see me or take in their place. They don't even know, too. They just fake it, too. CBS put me in fake conversations with themselves. They put little kids and myself when I was a little kid to fake ties to doctors who have their kids involved with proven first force child abusers, leaders, and kids. They have women judges and roles involved with sexual medical offenders of kids. Then they have to pretend to be against that. They have collusion /s with all nations. In other words, they can't appreciate anything that came before them legitimately. Because the way they were child abused, the way I recorded them being child abused. Since before they were in the Britain Superior Court, there are many involved with that court who had roles of organized crimes when they were kids. Forced, tricked, or persuaded. Organized crimes like, for example, predicate acts with facts. Like that collusion, sticking fake ties, fake natures of ties between people at each campus, putting fake motivations, putting fake intelligence in databases. You see them using words like radical and extremism. They want to have a debate about the integrity of the people behind that. And they want to use their own differences and the differences of the other branches with their nature of debate. That can't defend that and afford to be with the answer /s we have here and there. So, in other words, how our body /s are forced to be unity and to be independent at the same time we are prevented free speech to speak about it. They are refusing to identify themselves legitimately into branch because they have been fabricating in roles with it too, because the difference of guilt was his collusion too. And that's why this is a method from off all ages and natures of campuses. Collusion /s with location /s everywhere the human species body is. Every modern nation had this breaching method entrenched. The one that James Madison communicated about. You guys are pretending it's debatable. You get away with it because you're self-valuing criminally foreign influence takes on American history in books A through Z. There are proofs that who was behind the assassination of our president /chief. They put in there the school book depository to sense and to maintain that there's not one identity of sophistication capable of affording to be, let alone to protract short words with anybody by the sciences, by the identity of correlation that sends us these revelations. In other words, black people. We have the revelations, the answers that nature shows us and the questions that nature brings us properly. Forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, entertained, replaced. They are forcing a nature debate that it can't defend itself without valuing criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, quality aspects of nature, collusion slash S right through administrations. In other words, so and that so a Mark Violet, in other words, also a Kerr family, also a Kalol family, also people that were in two speech class, two times I took a cooking class in high school. People were facilitated to federal evidences crimes with their roles with Channel 3 News, as the same names next to Fox Connecticut News. And next to WTNH is the FBI, which is increasingly collusion slash S with the same names all along Route 175 and Route 3, and conjunctions to into that, as one's also with the principal child abusers campus in the corner of that street. Increasingly collusions with people named Cololo, and CM Faglione and O'Brien, with child abusers, leaders of kids, and people involved with men and women that also abused the kids of a principal child abuser, proven before that was proven. They had roles with it, and they abused the daughter of a principal when I went to the same school, as her roles with organized crime acts against me, identity theft, fraud, slanders against me, sequence shifts, as people involved with the sequence shift in the Ninth Circuit Court next to the World Trade Center towers that morning, proven after the attack, but it had been presented to the panel of judges next to the World Trade Center in the court next to it, right before the attack, or some time before the attack. They post dated, timely stamped legal papers. I recorded it tied to also conscious uses of names on both sides of that case, their sources, relative lawyers, and tied to them. And the court at the same time used remotely with the news too. Collusion slash S interstates with people with Saudi Arabia too. That Wethersfield police recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. There are people with the names Cololo, DeMoro, Scalora involved with wire crimes, evidences crimes, medical crimes, with sexual medical offenders of kids, adults, people involved with the elderly homes tied to them. At the same time, brought up the untimely death rolls and demonstrated. They have a former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering, Influence, and Corrupt Organizations Act. There are people tied to and as him who have roles with people who non-verbally make confessions and demonstrations, confirmations to me. In other words, that are involved with the criminally foreign influence uses of databases and all sides of criminal and civil cases. And the interbranch also groupthink. We don't have an identity of also radical and extremism. That are terms being used for nature of debate, wherein how it is functional by the breaching method, wherein how it has experts with criminally foreign influenced and tactically delusions raw readings of books and of religious books out of sequence too. No, sequence shifts self-value styles of logic, natures of logic, as experts know, where and how expertise it's relied upon, where the breaching method already showed all sides of criminal and civil cases, crime scenes, the news at the same time, and interbranch in other words, every day they're only capable, since founding, of forcing other things, others ourselves, to be blamed for things that nature itself keeps showing us to blame in the breaching method. But where it shows us the scientific value of the breaching method, nature itself does. It's what all those different multi-front civil rights and positions on women, civil rights and positions on native, civil right and on native tribe multi-front, specifically where this breaching method was measuring and maintaining by who's not going to be an extent of collusion slash S with such things. They had not just internationally monitored conversations that were used to force, measure, and maintain, agree to collusion slash S, everyone against each other. This is about, in other words, nature is forcing us to have negotiations, but you guys are forcing use slash s of the difference of titles, etc., like that. That can't be self-valued simultaneously, and you guys afford to have mandated law followed properly. You guys have had collusion slash s. Increasingly, all along from the founding locations in Old Weathersfield, increasingly people all along that from Main Street in Old Weathersfield, conjunction to it and to that, like Route 175, all along Route 175, and with the corners of it, a bunch of people that can't afford to have how they're in the background slandering me, identity theft, fraud, slander, fake motivations, and truth used for lies too, by the breaching while being used remotely. All that's recorded. Not just even overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and time collusions with terrorists. Their motivations, for example, they're calling their use. Everyone, ever since the World Trade Center attack, all of a sudden everyone's using this word extremism. All of a sudden people are using this word radical. They have criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, or readings of books and of the religions as the ones behind this, so they can pretend other people are. And they fake conversations about it. Mark Violet has multiple agencies in airport, Marines involved with them too. Air Force next to Hartford Hospital involved too, with the people with the translators and their family members, involved with all kinds of criminally foreign influence uses of them. And then they're going to investigate the World Trade Center attack. So they're also leaking because they fake conversations with me at Hartford Hospital. They have a bunch of people with the state corrections office and judicial branch offices involved with them, planting evidences on my street with a Leahy family from other people that I do it through. I never had a conversation with them. A whole bunch of men and women in a Leahy family, involved also with people named Lombardo, increasingly involved with people named Walters, increasingly involved with Hartford Hospital next to it, with all kinds of federal evidences, crimes, databases, the campuses, intercities, and intra. They have roles too with the new uses of names of women with the name Bobby and a male named Bobby. They have ones with the name different, name switching with Lena's Pizza on Park Street too. Is increasingly involved with various agencies, foreign and domestic, and former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, his lawyer, and the various natures of federal criminals, including ones that were his co-defendants in 2006 district court case, who were involved before the World Trade Center attack, in it and since, with databases used criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, including those at the World Trade Center, including the court next to it, and the differences of guilt with that were our manifest, because those were used remotely too. That's recorded. You guys know, but that was so timely. Why are you still asking that so long ago? You guys are involved with predicate acts each year since to hide it. You guys have roles with that girl dragged to her death, reportedly from next to Hartford Hospital, involved with Mark Violet and his brother too. Dragged from there right to the corner of Jordan Lane and Ridge Road. Same ones involved with the police chief Cintron and his extended family members, involved with the name Mazzucato. I don't even, they'll tell you, otherwise they're lying. I don't even know, I never even saw them at a campus I took classes at. Never saw them for 1 second on a campus I took classes at, of Mazzucato. I only know the name of Reno Mazzucato because he's involved with the confessions, also recorded to an extent, because of secretships. If he tries to deny it, John Maiano sought me out in 1994 to make confessions. In other words, and rolls with the intelligence families near me, which are also confirmations. And see that this was hidden before that. They had to hide live regressions. This is next to each campus, including different campuses, because they're making things look like if someone checks it in the future, they're going to verify things that aren't supposed to be verified. There's a quality of fact-checking nature that's criminal insidiousness. that is only allowed, only is only capable. But while it's only being allowed to, but there are exceptions of not appreciating properly why and how the relativity of the syntax inside the books, inside the school book depository. In other words, we could search the syntax has inherent to it, active to, and progressive to it. Criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, quality aspects, and natures at campuses A through Z, sickly distinctly, but also sickly non-distinctly. Black pupils, whites of eyes, left out, replaced. In other words, so I shouldn't have to beg to get myself off the fake conversations with the interbranch. I mean, with the news about the World Trade Center attack, while they were putting fake conversations with me, collusions with a principal child abuser, they forced that way. They have collusions through collusion slash S through time, with names involved next to the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices. Involved further with the girl they said was named. I don't know if this is she's married and has a lot different last name now, but it was I don't even remember her name. But WTNH recorded her involved also with people named O'Neill and Leahy and Brian Silver, involved with all kinds of identity theft, fraud, slanders with multiple courts, inter and intra cities, and inter and intra campuses, used not just criminally foreign influence, not just by the group. In other words, the UN has roles with all kinds of organized crimes and relative delusions, like with psychiatry too. These prisons are recorded, used remotely, shown as family members, as the differences of guilt between the positions there. In other words, they have readings of statutes and precedents by with one of the retired Wethersfield police chief lawyers involved with the public television too, as their roles with that criminally foreign influence and the networks at the same time, as ones increasingly with remote uses of the state judicial branch offices of Connecticut and of the state corrections offices, used remotely criminally foreign influence tactically delusions wrought. A number of people just repeat fake things between people. They make fake exceptions. People that, including, in other words, fake ties to me and to all ages. They're attaching kids and their family members to fake conversations about themselves and about the World Trade Center attack, interstates. Same ones involved with all these murders and stuff at the same time in body dumping spots. In that van, there are proofs of that blue van. And one of the people murdered by that serial killer was from Wethersfield too. Because a bunch of people next to where his, and these are also other countries involved with the companies together and gas stations and things like that. No. Eric Burgess and others, and Justin Govinskis and a Mark Violet also have collusions intercities with that body double spot with people that faked conversations with me to people that went to my grammar school that I never had a conversation with, never even saw them around. Increasingly, people involved with a O'Brien family, with multiple police departments, and with a Cololo family involved with former police chief Cintron and one years ago, and their family and intimate ties, and people collusions all along Route 3 in conjunctions to it and to that. And those two corners, like Elm Streets and Rocky Hill and Wethersfield, have a bunch of people from Wethersfield who have collusions, forced, tricked, or persuaded with the databases. They're just repeating fake things, and they're consolidating it. All kinds of, all ages and natures of investigations of investigators and of their campuses have been used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought per worse. People use passions and emotions dishonestly, relative to where and to how we have black pupils, whites of eyes to discern this. Not even a lawyer. The lawyers too have time collusions with their family member. Their interests, motivations are recorded too. It's not, and But this is what was is right where people want even need sometimes they need to have themselves blamed rather than have the quality of fact treatment nature. Because the quality of fact treatment nature, people have excuses, but people aren't allowed them. These are the people. If you guys defended Islam the way it was supposed to be defended, it would have changed the way people debate because they're not even supposed. The only thing that matters, it says all that matters, is if someone's honest about the name. Right up front, it says it. It dictates for people not even. The Quran dictates for the slave's reason. Don't pray in a mosque if you see a reason not to. It says the only thing that matters, all that matters, is if someone is honest about their use of the name, for the name of nature. See, pantheism is this science, not about an ism, because it's about function. If you name it like a pantheism, now you're dealing with the invisible but still discernible. Nature holds functional about how that it is the invisible but still discernible. For example, the value of the parts of speech of English grammar, of other languages, but it also is itself further distinctly hyper invisible but still discernible. As that generating two eyes across species bodies, as that generating two sexes, as that generating what is greater than, while more finite than, and with active relativity to greater than any subject slash S that we could appreciate individually, grouped, or simultaneously. The hyper simultaneous is demonstrated to us, generating all things. That's one of the, in other words, with the simultaneous. As it and as the what we are its identity relationship to itself, nature's. We can observe its individual body to an extent. It is also the individual body we can discern, the hyper invisible but still discernible. Where and how the parts of speech about the invisible but still discernible. But simultaneously, why and how we need to appreciate more than one word for a verb, for example, is also that's the body of itself, the hyper invisible but still discernible. The present participle and the past participle, for example, two of the hyper additional names for a verb. There is no future participle, but because the future is hyper invisible but still discernible distinctly from the and it is invisible but still discernible distinctly from how it is as the past in the active. See, the future and the active are coupled and they're simultaneous value and they're individual at the same time. Every individual thing has three parts of the rest of nature's complete identity inseparable from it. Even the smallest finite part of your body has nature's complete identity manifest as three, as 1/3/5 identities of conjunction. As an identity of conjunction slash S to all things, while as them, even if you make something up like art, this nature volume science slash hypervolume science is that way. To, from, as, with, and for, the difference between and as, the smallest finite detail of your art, of real life, or the order of the finite. And while it is distinctly itself, nature self, that which is active and or grouped, and while it is distinctly itself, nature, that which is simultaneous and or progressive. And it is only increasing value here, or as our value forced from here with the special differences value. Our value where we are its volume science that did not employ us to be building people stacking in cities while our founders declassified about how the suburbs were only permitted to unfold the way they did by a torture, extortion, and slavery method, northern colonies, southern colonies, entrenched through identities, through layers of other identities to screen not just then, but now. The scientific value of the breaching method. There are still collusions there and here now, replacing right from the communications of our founders, right from nature itself. And we're, again, directed to not refer to any of our founders besides James and Madison. So, in conclusion, please don't anyone change and fake what I said about those news predicate acts, fake World Trade Center attack intelligence, collusion slash S, former director there, former standing chairperson on the Racketeering, Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. It was his recorded how himself and how the sense and sensibilities of the other identities of the law at countries A through Z, and then further as grouped and then further, all humanity voicings, incapable of defending their styles and natures of logic, where and how they speak for humanity, where and how they speak for the most critical subjects, in other words, where and how they claim to be appreciating what other people say. You guys have been fishing with everything I say around the predicate acts I told you were brought up at the same time. So also interbranch have been faking transcripts to hide their collusion slash S with everything that came before them, including murders and body dumping spots. Then they have to pretend, because they're trying to hurt the guy. The guy's going to go to prison for a long time anyway. They'll change the fake details and facilitate self-value collusion slash S. In other words, then to pretend that in other words, please follow mandated law for them and stop making me leak for you guys too. Please. Mazzucato Bakery. Someone asked Mazzucato Bakery to get what the police chief Cintron on paper with the police that have been forging names, switching names, fake conversations with me as a kid and as an adult. Many who had conversations with an Eric Mendez. He's reportedly of the class of 1993. Never saw him around school. One time on the outside, real quick, at high school. I mean, outside real quick, one at high school. And in other words, when I played on team, I didn't see Mario helmet on, never talked to him. And that was only one game I did, in other words. And there were conversations with where they had to cover up life aggressions. And they used a John Mayano to start making confessions to me. And he made and to demonstrations to me too, though, while pretending other. You guys, in other words, you guys get involved with when people use other people's names. You can't explain things without using their names. And when I try to use it without using people's names, they commit predicate acts against us with the ones who've been putting fake things in databases from other classrooms that had to pretend they knew us then or before we knew them. They have to hide how and when we knew them because they were planting evidences. The breaching method shows the interbranch. They can't afford to have discern what's actually discernible at countries A through Z. All locations, areas, and states. They're only permitting the leaders to hide details, to hide the actual value of their syntax with all these critical subjects. So it is involved with an organized crime method slash S worse than war crimes. And they aren't capable of drafting statutes till we let nature lead how to show this properly, legislation properly. They can only do it as collusion slash S. We have all we need recorded. See Marbury versus Madison. Not leaving out what he declassified. About how and why even that. He didn't have free speech. Real justice must satisfy all appearances of real justice. Vaccines. This is appreciate Marbury versus Madison. Follow mandated law. Get them on paper, interbranch first, because there are a whole bunch of other countries involved with the interbranch. A bunch of people in the British Superior Court have foreign and domestic military too, involved with when I was a little kid, with the educators that I didn't even have. They try to make it look like other with fake exceptions. They're involved with this O'Brien family and the multiple police departments have time collusion slash S intercities and intra-cities. and then preventing people free speech by stealing our identities. See, the interbranch are identity theft, fraud, slander styles that countries A through Z. They were abused since they were kids to be. Increasingly, two speech class teachers I had, and two cooking classes I was in, had people that were roles planting evidences on all sides of my house. There was a lot of phenomena. There was a lot of phenomena recorded for the phenomenon of where and how since I and me and other people when we were kids, when you try to use the black people's white device, all countless means we have to make the right. In other words, we have the difference of there are people defending our founders as our founders directed us not to allow people to be other than James Madison to be pretended one of the known founders, plural. People want to have the nature debate. Say, "Oh, Thomas Jefferson drafted the Constitution." Thomas Jefferson was a president slash chief, but he wasn't one of the people that we were told was a founder. Definitely, all the people at the Constitutional Convention were forced to be there by the breaching method, not just by, but also by James Madison's plan, but by the breaching method too. No one had free speech. They had to pretend other motivations. They had to lie about their motivations because the breaching method needed everyone to keep other things other than themselves blamed. Right where nature itself was is showing the breaching method is a scientific value. And James Madison communicated it. But please, don't fake and change and hide the various natures of organized crimes brought up by the fake conversations with me. And as the value of their fake conversations entices to me that WFSB has, increasingly they're forcing me to speak about this too so they can pretend that they're trying to hide privacy. I don't know the Mazzucato family. They're trying to use every exception with a former police chief, Centron, and the FBI director, and people on my street involved with predicate acts from other areas planting evidences. They're trying to hide what's actually recorded because they already have collusion /S with everything that came before them. They have roles against little kids, multi-front. They have roles against elderly, multi-front. We're going to pay attention to how little kids could discern. These aren't the means that we could afford. And when I say afford, I mean by value per nature. Because the people with the money, too, like the differences of guilt. In other words, better than free, they owe more money than we need with psychiatry and with the organized crimes associated with the databases and these families that are incapable. You have a bunch of fakes with their patients and their family members that run in to hide live aggressions, as shown needs to and means to, per their roles with the predicate acts with facts method /S recorded. That nature keeps showing us. But it shows us collusion /S everywhere the human species body has a body standing. So follow mandated law for WFSB, please. These are also people with the other networks and their sources. There's no Neil family that faked ties to me, and they have collusions of whiting forensics with Saudis. That also a Mendez police officer. I never had a word of conversation with him in my life. He wrote a different name. I was told his name was Janito Mendez. And he has a brother named Eric Mendez also involved with him from the Wethersfield, because the Wethersfield Police Department, I never had a conversation with him in my life, and no other police officer when I went in there. And he forced my Saudi ex to collusion /S with them, increasingly with people involved with Wethersfield Police and the FBI, who were interstates next to the World Trade Center and added collusion /S, including with all sides of the case in the court used remotely. And you guys are preventing me from speaking about the other recorded things that they've been trying to hide. And a whole bunch of names rolls next to the reported serial killer's body dumping spot that are involved with other ones through the years too. And time use /S of that were recorded at the same time and confirmed on Facebook. They do all kinds of things to take people's Facebook pages after people confirm things to them online. Where and how is recorded that investigators and their family members were all used remotely. Facebook, it has rules with the agencies too, with the word extremism, changing and faking it. And I put it in after that and let them then use it, they'll use the truth for a lie. Because that's why I put it in after it. When they changed what I said to extremism in a post, which is also their collusion slash S. And the Britain Superior Court has a number of people personally and professionally involved with Facebook leadership through administrations who also have roles in Weathersfield town offices, used remotely, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw, and the other election spots. It's not just criminally foreign influence uses the campuses. They also have positions with the campuses that make nonverbal confirmations too. Where people speak about then they know a whole bunch of people tied to a Luigi Guerrero and a John Maiano involved with the world and people with the name Demoro involved with the World Trade Center attack, untimely deaths, time collusion slash S, confessions, hiding the confessions confirmed on Facebook brought the principal child abuser's campus to me first. And his prison, Sandy Hook prison, they forced that, not told on, as collusion slash S with all kinds of evidences, crimes. And they didn't even let me speak so they could pay and made the guy keep calling back and make confessions to me, the other whole bunch of messages on machine so on to make it look like we spoke. And he told me that's what made me keep calling back and make more confessions and confirmations. Then we could never get to speak. They put harassment for calling up the school, where the people put the rape threats against the kids with the court too. The Britain Superior Court has people with the name Kerr and Knerr too. Officer Jerry Miller is one of the ones planting evidence on all sides of my house with them. Also, people tied with I never saw a Mendez family on my street in my life. A bunch of people tied to him with wire crime acts and methods, with interbranch. These are police phones, families, and ones tied to them. Also involved with next to the all kinds of get them on paper, one name and sequence people. Get me off of fake conversations with the interbranch and the news, multi-front, all kinds of different natures of organized crime acts that the interbranch and that the intelligence and that the news they have different distinctly, but also non-distinctly. And that was his time collusion slash S with a whole bunch of other countries. That's the value of putting fake things in there. That's the value of them. They need to. When I told you, when I tried to speak about things without using people's names, they make confessions. They commit predicate acts, overt identity theft, fraud, slanders. You guys should fear God to pretend you're going to defend yourselves as Facebook and Meta. You guys hid this. And the agencies involved with you, foreign and domestic. Get down.